Hey garden friends, I'm going to talk about 5 garden chores that I need to get done before winter really sets in. And some of those things are cutting back things that others recommend you don't at this time of year. And I'll explain why. Yeah, this is the time of year when it's recommended we cut back many things, whether it's to prevent pest infestations or disease problems, etc. Now, many times I ignore those things because I've over time learned that they don't work for me in my garden, or they're not as important as is stated. Let's get started. I'm going to share with you some things that I do cut back that most people recommend that you do not, and I'll tell you why. So right back here is a buddleia. This is hot raspberry. Now, most people will tell you to not prune them back or cut them back until spring, late winter, early spring. For me, that doesn't work because I get such heavy, wet snows, and these stems will get broken down, be smashed to the ground, and that causes much more damage. And I've had perfect success with cutting them down to maybe under 18 inches, a foot, and through before the first snows hit. Now we're coming up early November, and I will keep an eye on the weather. We can have our first snows in November, and if there are a lot coming, I will make sure that I cut it back before it's gotten broken. I have a whole video on pruning back buddleias, and I show you how it looks when I didn't get to it soon enough and the snows did break it down. So buddleia is one thing that I do prune back hard in late fall or right before our first snows. And they grow beautifully. Roses. Roses, everyone says, no, don't cut them back until late winter, early spring. For me, that's not accurate either, for the same reasons. The heavy, wet snows will snap or break the canes. And then that damage is much worse than my cutting them back. I'll cut them back to 3 feet in the fall. We have not had our first freeze or frost yet. We had a near frost, but it wasn't quite cold enough. But that's why mine are still blooming and still putting on growth. And so I will wait a little while longer and I'll watch the weather again for snows. And then if we were going to have a decent snowfall, I'll come out and cut these back to 3 feet or less because of the damage that those snows will do to the longer canes. And I don't bother with removing the leaves off. Some people strip all the leaves off, etc. I don't do that, even though it is said that it can prevent black spot or powdery mildew. You know what? I do other things for that if it becomes a problem. Sometimes it's not a problem. We have arid conditions, so it's not like we have humidity, a lot of it. We do have, come spring, the warm days, cool nights, which is perfect for powdery mildew. And then I will use my rosemary clove spray with some neem oil if I feel it's necessary. And you know what? In the fall, I don't always clean up the leaves either that fall to the ground. I've had no big issues with disease or pests, and I have found that completely an unnecessary step. I will pour on here a few inches of compost that I buy in bulk from a local turkey ranch, and continue on from there. So a lot of I have a video on using milk spray for powdery mildew, and it did work. So if you have a problem with it, try that milk spray for powdery mildew. Look at this. Look at this repeating iris or reblooming iris. You see there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 buds on it. Isn't that beautiful? I don't often get rebloom on even reblooming iris because of the short season that I have, but when I do get them, such a treat. Now, another thing that most people tell you not to prune back until late winter, early spring, or when they first start putting out buds is the panicle hydrangeas. That again doesn't work for me for the same reason. The heavy wet snows, you see how this is all leaning down? That is because last winter I gave it a test. And we didn't even have a hard, heavy snowfall winter. And yeah, it made all of the canes lean. And even though I tied as much up as I could, it was no fixing the lean. So this year, this fall, I'm going to make sure I cut them back. This one I'm hoping to get moved. If I don't get it moved, so be it. But yeah, this one's going to get cut back as well as that one. That one I may leave a few long canes, the Zinfandel right here, and then I can tie that up to the fence and that may help it. But a lot of times people leave them too because they look beautiful in the winter. And if you don't get heavy wet snows like I do, they can look really pretty through the winter. The frost will get on them and then they'll be sparkly in the sunlight. Yeah, and all the flower heads are just beautiful. But it doesn't work for me. And if you want to prune them back in the fall before hard winter hits, go right ahead. I learned that too when I was at the horticultural show 2 years ago. I was talking to a gentleman in one of the booths about this. And he's like, there is nothing wrong with you pruning back earlier. Absolutely nothing wrong. The preference is later in the season, but it doesn't mean it has to be that way. So do what's best for you. And that is something I've learned over my 40 plus years of gardening is I have to garden for what's best for me in my conditions and not what the general gardening community says you're supposed to do. You've got to learn what works in your area. Down here is some Nepeta. And many people say that you need to cut it back for the winter. And that is also one of those choices. I have had winters where I have cut it back. And then there's been ones where, like this winter, I mean, it's still blooming and the pollinators are still coming around. And I don't want to deny them anything. If I were to get a hard freeze and it turned really ugly and yucky, I may go ahead and cut it back if I have time. But it's not something that I'm going to worry about if I don't get to it. Because I've had it over winter, it dies back. And then I just cut off the dead foliage come spring when everything is starting to come out and I have the time to be out here cleaning it up. But would it give me a head start come spring if I went ahead and trimmed it back now? Yes, it would. And that's always an option. But just know that you don't have to if you don't get to it. Over here I have this beautiful salvia as well. This is a nice fuchsia salvia. And that one also I could cut back if I so desired. Here's some Veronica, same story. But right now there's still a little bit of bloom on them. And this is almost November. So yeah, I want to let the pollinators have what they need until everything is gone or under snow. I'm just looking at some plants. It looks like some deer have been in here and grazing, but that's okay. It's that time of year and they can do some pruning for me. So here is a chore that many people tell you to do that, again, you have to go with what works for you locally. Many people will say, take in your hummingbird feeders. I will tell you that I do not, because our hummingbirds here, the Annas, they overwinter here in the woods. Now, I don't know where you live, but you need to find out if you have hummingbirds that overwinter in your locale, and they can benefit from having feeders out. Now, I usually whittle down from 5 to 6 feeders through the summer to 1 and 2 through the winter because I don't have that many that winter right here. And I enjoy watching them on the feeders in the snow and all through the winter. I get to enjoy the hummers coming to the feeders. So make sure you go with what's right for you locally when it comes to removing or not removing your hummingbird feeders. Here's another plant that's hit or miss as far as me cutting back before winter hits, and that's hostas. You can see this one is finally turning color, and some years I get to it, other years I don't. Right here is the snow shed from my studio cottage, Primrose Cottage, and the snow builds up deep right here. So many people will recommend cutting them back so you avoid like slug eggs, etc., nesting underneath the hostas and then being a problem. I've not had that kind of issue, but I also use a product called First Saturday Lime. It's natural, it's organic, safe for pets, and it doesn't turn caustic when it's wet. And I spread it around on the ground before or as the leaves are emerging, and I have had no issues with slugs. And some people say don't compost the leaves because the slugs will get into your compost. It's okay. Slugs help to help compost to deteriorate or to just, be digested. And they serve a purpose. You never want to be completely rid of some of these bugs in your garden because they do serve a purpose. It's when you get too many, and they proliferate when there's an imbalance in your garden. And that's where the synthetics, the pesticides, the herbicides, and all of that, and the synthetic fertilizers, they create that imbalance, which then causes you to have heavier pest pressure than is necessary. If you garden organically, you will have less problems with bad pests because you will have created an environment that is good for predatory insects that come in and they equalize, they eat the bad pests, and then it creates harmony in the garden. So there's not as many bad pests to bother your plants like your hostas. Or if you do, there's a few holes in here, but it's not enough to detract from the overall beauty. And I never want to be completely try to eliminate certain pests in my garden. Yeah, I had to continue this the next day. Another thing that many times I will prune back in fall that others may recommend you don't is my pruning type 3 clematis. This is Warsaw Nike here. This is a wall of purple when it's in bloom. It blooms on new wood. I have noticed this one will also bloom on old wood. So it's a mix. So anyways, I will many times cut it back hard in the fall, all the way down to 8, 12 inches. Other times, like last year, which I think I'm going to do again this year, I cut a third of it back to 12 inches. Then a third I cut back, the other third up to about my height or here, my chin. And then the other I will leave all the way up to the top. Now what that does is this year I was able to get blooms up higher as the second row is blooming and the third row is blooming, and then I had more blooms further up. Now before, when I've cut it down to 12 inches, it will get about this tall, and then it starts to flop because all of it is the same height, and it's heavy right there. I do try to train it up, but I have found with the incremental in thirds, I don't have as much of an issue of some of it falling down outwards. So let me know your experience in pruning your type 3. I always say it wrong, pruning type 3 clematis. Now the one I have up front, which is Pearl de Jour, that one this last summer died back dramatically. Midsummer, I don't know why. It scared me. I thought I lost it because that is a most beautiful clematis. And last year, I did not prune it in fall. I did wait till late winter, early spring. So this year I think I'm going to make sure, well, I did prune it back when I thought it was dead, so it has been pruned back, but I have noticed new growth on it, so maybe it's coming back. I don't know, gophers may have attacked it. None of my clematis are in gopher cages. I'm sorry for the helicopter noise. Do you see all these iris in here? I may not get to cutting them back before the first snow, and you know what? It's not the end of the world. I have not had any trouble with borers or fungus or anything. I do have some black spotty things on here, but I still get beautiful blooms come in the spring. Yep, the leaves get slimy and stuff underneath there, but it is one thing. It's not that I don't cut them back. It's that I don't get the chance to get to all of them before our first snows. There's so many things going on that it just doesn't take priority because I know I'm going to have beautiful blooms no matter if I cut them back or not. And you'll have to test it in your own garden. There are many reasons. There's people who do struggle with diseases and borers and bugs and whatever that attack your garden. But if you create a balance like a permaculture in your garden, you'll have less pest problems, and then you won't have to worry about so much interfering or with the plants themselves to prevent problems. So that's why I always really impress upon people about organic gardening methods and how beneficial they are across the board. They just make your gardening life so much easier because of the health of your garden. The plants that make it and do well they're the ones that toughed it out in your conditions. So it's another thing, if you can't get to it, you can skip. Greenhouse update. The porch is going on. So hopefully next week I'll get to move in. Only time will tell. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video on the things that are often recommended to be pruned this time of year in fall that I don't, and why. And you may not have to either. It's just another take on some common gardening advice that you may need to test for yourself and see. And earlier I mentioned about the deer damage. They had done some pruning, and that is one year how I learned that my roses would do so much better pruned back in fall than waiting until late winter, early spring. Is I had deer go through and they mowed them down. They must have been super hungry because they ate all the way down to like 20 inches. And then the next year I had the sturdiest, strongest, the best blooming roses ever. And I thought, oh, and I did my research. I was listening to a rosarian on a podcast, and he was talking about he had moved from one area to another and how his rose growing techniques that he had moved from didn't work to where he moved to. He had to change all the ways he treated or maintained his roses. So that emphasized, even to me, that you need to adapt to your local growing conditions. And that's what I've done here with these methods. There is no one size fits all. So some people will say, oh, you shouldn't do this or you should do that. And you need to find out what really suits your area. And yeah, because sometimes people will take gardening advice they'll see gardeners online, or they'll read something and they'll take it as gospel, as that's how it works universally. And I'm just here to tell you that it doesn't. I have gardened in 3 different zones, a 9B, a 5A, and here, 8B. Used to be, well, it started out when I was here, a 7B. But yeah, so, and the conditions vary, even in the same zone. So I want to make sure I said that too, because that can be deceptive as well. So I hope you enjoyed this video and you learned something new today, and I will wish you happy gardening. All right, I'll see you in my next video. Bye.